Right, we're at 10:45 on a Wednesday morning. I'm sure by now you're all aware of the United Airlines story.
Hey, there you go. Busted his lip.
Oh my God, look at what you did to him.
That's David Dow being forcibly removed, dragged in fact, from a United Airlines flight after claims the flight was overbooked. The footage of security officers dragging him from the plane and his injuries was viewed online over 1.5 million times, and the figures today have shown that the airline has lost £1 billion in profit and its share price. It's fair to say it's been a bad old week for United, but what can companies do when they face a reputation crisis like this? What can they do to win back the loyalty of customers, and can a company ever reverse the damage that was caused to its brand? Joining me to talk about this morning, Director of Holyrood PR in Edinburgh, Scott Douglas. Morning, Scott.
Morning, Stephen.
How bad is this in terms of reputation for United Airlines?
It's as bad as it gets. They've got a bit of form for this. You know, they were the poster child for real bad social media cock-ups in 2008 when the whole United Break Guitars video went viral. That was a guy who was a musician, and he spotted his guitars being thrown about by ground staff. It was smashed and he couldn't get any compensation. He wrote a funny song about it. So the airline literally became the poster child for poor customer service, and they've been trying to recover from that ever since. This, I would say, is just an order of magnitude greater.
Now, we talk about reputation damage, Scott, but it's much, much worse than that, as shown by what happened to United's share price yesterday on the US Stock Exchange.
Yep, and that's what that will be in the long term. We'll have to wait and see. As I said, they've been here before. The guy who's in charge, Oscar Munoz, the chief executive, has actually, for the past 2 years, been repairing the reputation of this company and been doing a very, very fine job of it. He was actually named earlier this month, ironically, he was named America's Communicator of the Year because he's been doing such a good job. So he's not a guy who's going to be sitting very happily to know that, a week or two after him getting this award, his company is in the spotlight for all of the wrong reasons. And yes, one of the reasons he's been successful is he built the stock value and the reputational value and the profits of the company back up from a low place, and this is going to be a huge setback for him.
Scott, you look after the reputations of companies and you help them when they get into difficult situations. How do you think United have handled this issue?
As I say, Stephen, it's been a really bad fortnight for them. Because just prior to this, they had the whole leggings gate scandal where they were absolutely vilified by, first on social media, but then inevitably by the mainstream media as well, for turning 2 young women away from a flight because they were wearing leggings. You can imagine the outrage that caused. I mean, they weren't inappropriately dressed. They just decided that leggings wasn't what they wanted on their flight at that particular time. They handled that pretty poorly. They came out. These are emotional responses people are looking for. They react to these kind of issues emotionally, and a company has to have the emotional intelligence to react back properly on that. And yet, their first reaction was to quote their very dry policy. Fresh off the back of that, they then find themselves in, I think, an unfortunate situation. They're not the only airline to bump passengers. Yeah, it happens a lot. But this overreaching law enforcement officer's gone in. The whole situation's escalated horribly. It's been caught on video. When that happens, fresh off the back of the leggings gate, they should have known. This is hugely worse than what we've had in the past week. We need to get on this. We need to make the apology. We need to say this isn't good enough. We need to apologise to this passenger. We need to make this right. And yet they came out again and quoted policy. The first thing the CEO did was to say how difficult it had been for his staff. Then he came out with a second apology, saying it was upsetting to everyone at United, and he apologised for having to, quote, reaccommodate these customers. He said his team was moving with a sense of urgency to work with the authorities. It was just entirely the wrong response. It was dry, it was corporate, and it didn't really get to the heart of what the subject was, and that was that people were truly and utterly appalled.
The big change, obviously, here, Scott, is social media, isn't it? Because 20 years ago, this story might have surfaced in a newspaper a few days after the fact, with or without photography. But the fact of the matter is here that social media outrage can get in front of a brand, as it did here with United Airlines, and create a crisis before they have suitably reacted.
Exactly. Yeah, getting in front of the brand's exactly what it is, Stephen. You know, it's out there and it is spreading faster than you can imagine in minutes. And as you say, the news cycle used to be days and weeks, and it's now seconds and minutes. That's why it's even more important. And again, I have to say that it's so unlike the CEO of this company. He's transformed them in their communication and their customer service, and even in their own internal staff satisfaction. So for the company to have been caught out twice in a week, or in a fortnight, it really is a bad. It's a perfect storm in many ways, you know. And they were slow. They were clay-footed about this.
Where do they go from here, Scott? I mean, it's hitting them on all fronts. There is a boycott campaign on social media for people to boycott and fly with other airlines. There is the problem with the share price as well, the problem with the corporate image. How do they start to rebuild this?
Thankfully, by Tuesday, so on the third day of asking, they got their apology right. It would have been an awful lot better had they just come out with that first, but they've now said, you know, it is PR 101. It's the original handbook. You acknowledge what's happened on an emotional level. You say this isn't good enough. It's horrible. We understand why people are upset. We're upset ourselves. We are now going to apologise deeply for this because it is bang out of order. So acknowledge, apologise, and then draw a line in the sand and say, this is what we are going to do to fix this and make it better. And they've now said that. And they've also set a date for when they'll report back. They're going to report back by the end of the month. So, you know, that'll be the next point to judge them on, Stephen, what they come back. Because they're saying they're not going to just look at the incentivising passengers when they want them to leave. They're going to look at the whole policy of the oversold tickets. And they're going to look at how they liaise with local airport authorities and local law enforcement. Because, you know, in many ways, the guys that dragged this poor passenger off the plane weren't United Airlines employees. They were police officers. Yeah, they were police and security officers with badges. So they've overreached as well. Nobody really cares about that. Well, your law enforcement in America isn't known for being level-handed a lot of the time. You know, it's the airport that has to wear the hair shirt on this. And they are. So what will happen now is what comes out. You know, they'll hopefully steady the ship. They're not going to do anything about the social media boycott because, you know, those people are going to boycott now. That's that. But they have to rebuild that whole situation that Oscar Munoz was already doing to rebuild this company's brand and reputation. They've taken a major step backwards. They're going to have to start doing that again.
Scott, thanks for your view and your expertise this morning. That's Scott Douglas, Director of Holyrood PR. 10:53 Wednesday morning. It's BBC Radio Scotland.